Alright, now that this video is long overdue, we're finally getting around to the 10.0.5 Moonkin guide for M+. We're going over everything a Moonkin should be doing in a key. Let me preface this by saying Moonkin's a class that struggles heavily in low keys. If packs don't live for your entire incarn, you're not going to do any damage, you're going to feel really sad throughout the whole key, which lends itself to Moonkin performing better on Fortified than Tyrannical as well. We'll start by looking at talents, rotation, then we'll do boring stuff like trinkets, consumes, how I think, stuff like that. I'll leave import strings in the description for all the builds I show. Starting off, a build that I've been playing and liking in just about every scenario. It feels really nice on Tyrannical, it feels really nice on Fortified. One of the shortcomings of this build is relying on Starweaver to provide your single target damage. And it also plays mushrooms, which some people don't like. I would say you could play this in every key and be fine with it, but there are some changes I would make if I was going to go to specific keys on specific weeks. For example, in Fortified Halls, Azure Vault, and Knockhood, I would switch Starweaver to Rattle the Stars unless it's a bolstering week, in which case I would make no changes. This build plays pretty much the same as the general build, and it's best in these kinds of dungeons, especially on Fortified. You'll pull decent amounts of trash, and your damage will really start to shine when you have larger packs. You don't give up too much single target playing this, only a little bit from changing to Rattle from Weaver. Next build is the Alg'ethar Academy build. You'll play this on Fort and Tyrannical. It places a heavy emphasis on AoE damage while giving up a lot of boss damage, but since the pulls in this dungeon are really large, you'll notice a lot better performance by playing this build. One thing to note is that since you're playing 2 Umbral Intensity points, you'll want to go Solar Eclipse on pure single target on the bosses when you're not in a Pulsar window. The main advantage of this build is buffing your Starfire with Umbral Intensity and being able to maintain your Waning Twilight through the pack with Wild Mushroom without having to put up too many Stellar Flares, which is really nice in the Lasher area. Last Fortified build we're going to look at is what I call the Low Density build. This is what you're going to play in Temple of the Jade Serpent, Court of Stars, Shadow Moon, and Ruby Life pools. This is because those dungeons have really small trash pulls, and all that really matters for getting through the key is the bosses, which is why you focus on taking Denizens of the Dream. If you don't want to play a second point in Boat, you could put a point in Wild Mushroom without Fungal Growth. This might be better in dungeons like Court and Ruby. You can also opt to move the point from Boat to Umbral Intensity, although I think that taking Mushrooms is slightly better. Moving into Tyrannical builds, the build that I like to play in Halls of Valor, Azure Vault, and Knockhood is actually the same as the general build that I started with. This is because Wild Mushroom gains a lot of value in Tyrannical since packs don't live as long, and it takes advantage of Starweaver, which gives you a much higher single target. Some things to consider. If you don't want to play Mushrooms, you can play a second point in Boat and a point in Umbral Intensity. It really comes down to preference, although I think Mushrooms are very nice in Tyrannical for getting your damage rolling on the packs that don't live as long and keeping your waning value rolling. For the sake of consistency in the chapters, I'm going to show this build again, but it's the Alg'ethar build. You just play Mushrooms and 2 UI, explanation's the same. You don't play this build any differently from Fort to Tyrannical. The only thing I might change is considering to not play 2 Umbrals and instead drop a point in Boat. Depending on the level of Alg'ethar you're going to do, I would even default back to the first build I showed, just because if the packs are dying too fast, Umbral Intensity is going to lose a lot of value, and you're going to feel pretty sad. This is a Tyrannical only thing. Weaver's going to give you a lot of boss prio, which could be good in Alg'ethar since those bosses are pretty scary. And again, for consistency's sake, this is the low density build we'll play for Tyrannical. Again, same things I said in the Fortified section. You can change out a Denizen of the Dream in favor of an Umbral Intensity if you want. You can take a point out of Boat, go Wild Mushroom if you want. It really comes down to preference. One thing to pay attention to in the general class tree, if you need to get to Decurse because you're in Temple of the Jade Serpent, is taking 2 points out of Urson Vigor and putting them here and here, and a point out of Cyclone to put it in Remove Corruption. Additionally, if you are in any dungeon that you don't feel you need Urson Vigor to live, that's 20% health and armor when you get in bear form. Essentially, if you're not doing super high keys, you may find that it's better to move your 2 points to 1 Minute Roar and a second point in Well-Honed Instincts. This is a more passive way to live, and this can help speed up the key, especially if you're not able to mount. However, I think that playing 2 Urson is also a safe option if you ever feel like you're in danger to dying to a one-shot mechanic. One of the nice things about the new Moonkin tree is that the damage of the talents is so similar from talent to talent that only a sim can really tell them apart. You'll likely find that playing whatever you're most comfortable with will yield the highest damage, unless you're doing world first keys. I can't stress enough that playing whatever's comfortable is the correct thing to do. And trying to copy a talent build that you are uncomfortable with is going to cause your damage to go down. For example, if you never play with mushrooms and you try to play with them, you will probably lose damage. Likewise, if you only play with mushrooms and you randomly try to go without them, you'll probably also lose a lot of damage. The only talent that is shown well in Sims that I would recommend never taking is Astral Smolder. That talent sims for a lot more damage than it's actually worth. Now that we talked about talents, let's talk about rotation and how to open on a pack. Once you have Moonfire and Sunfire and everything, it's time to get in an Eclipse. You'll want to send 2 Wraths to get into Lunar Eclipse. Then you'll want to use your free Starfall. Activate Incarn, use your free spender again, and start spending. Ideally, you should never reach 100 AP. You should always be sending Starfalls pretty much whenever you're able. And when you can't do that, you'll want to be pressing Starfire. One thing a lot of people seem to struggle with is starting on a pack. Going into this first pull Knockhood, we plan to play 14 mobs. The number 1 priority is going to be putting up 14 Moonfires and a Sunfire once it's all stacked. So you'll see I'm tab targeting around, putting up Moonfire on everything I can, taking advantage of Twin Moons. Once it all gets stacked together, I'll press Sunfire. Here's a situation where I'm not playing Wild Mushrooms, but ideally would like to be, just because Waning Twilight would gain a lot of value on this pack. 8% on 14 mobs can add up quite quickly, and I'm not going to take the time to put up 14 Stellar Flares here. After that, it's just about keeping your Rattle stacks up, pressing Starfall when you can, and pressing Starfire as your filler. We'll take a look at a slightly smaller pull as well. Here's a Halls of Valor where we're only playing 7 mobs. Something I don't do in this clip is put up my Stellar Fillers quickly, but once you have all your Moonfires and Sunfires rolling and you're in an Eclipse, you should be aiming to put up all your Stellar Flares, spending your Starfalls as appropriate. If you know a pack's going to die rather fast, sometimes it may not be worth to put up the Stellars, and those are situations where you should be playing Wild Mushrooms, because Waning Twilight value is very important. We'll talk about the boring stuff. The 2 embellishments you'll want to wear are Elemental Lariat and Potion Duration. I recommend putting Potion Duration on your crafted ring and aiming for the Razageth Dagger, although if you'll never kill Mythic Razageth, then it's fine to put the Potion Duration on a weapon. As far as gems go for the Lariat, you'll want to wear 1 main stat gem with Mastery, and sim yourself to see whether you like to play Keen Neltharites or Keen Emeralds. That's high Mastery, low haste, or high haste, low Mastery. Typically, the sims will have you playing a combination of both. As far as consumables go, we're going to be playing Elemental Potion's Ultimate Power, which is the main stat potion, grants 800 and some odd intellect. In combination with Incarn, this makes Minkin very strong on every other Incarn, an extra 1000 main stat, on top of the fact that you gain both Eclipse values and haste and crit. Turns Minkin into a very powerful cooldown class. As far as files, you can use Tepid Versatility or Corrupting Rage. I recommend playing Tepid Verse, because the DR is very valuable, on top of consistent damage. If you know you take a lot of damage, you'll be losing a lot of uptime on Corrupting Rage, and that can quickly make it a much worse file. For Weapon Rune, we're playing Howling Rune, which is the haste one, and we'll play main stat food, so you'll want to eat feasts or the fortune cookies. As far as trinkets, best trinkets are Whispering Incarnate Icon from Primal Council in the raid. The only time you don't wear this on its own is if you have a 395 version and you're the only person wearing one. If your tank or healer have it, it's worth at 395, and if it's 408 or 421, it's worth to wear on its own. For second trinket, you'll want to get the Voidmender's Shadow Gem from Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, or the Furious Rage Feather from Knockhood Offensive. I recommend playing Shadow Gem on trash-dense dungeons like Halls, Knockhood, etc., on Fortified Weeks, and Feather on the less dense dungeons and on Tyrannical. If you don't have any of these, you can look for a Crafted Alchemy Stone or Infernal Writ from Court of Stars, but since Rage Feather and Shadow Gem are so easily farmable, I'd recommend just going and getting those, especially because you can get them at 415. Something I notice a lot of people struggle with is managing their 4-piece properly. The fastest, easiest answer is in pure single target, you press Star Surge, and if you have more than one target, you press Starfall. There are some situations where you wouldn't want to Star Surge on single target, namely, if you are proccing your Pulsar with it, you should always press Starfall. Since Starfall lasts 8 seconds, it'll gain all the Pulsar value, but if you were to Star Surge, it would only gain the value of the Eclipse you were in. Another thing is that in the past, Moon can gain a lot of value from extending your Incarn as long as possible, but with the Star Surge changes in Dragonflight, it's best to sometimes let it drop, then proc your Pulsar, and then continue with your rotation, like I do in this clip here. Something you'll notice is that I end up with 590 out of 600 spent on my Pulsar with an empty AP bar. And so what I'll do is just build AP, refresh my dots, drop out, then activate the pulsar again. This gives me an additional spender from my 4-piece, and then I continue with my rotation as normal. The next most common question I receive is, why are you casting Wrath in your Lunar Eclipse? And the short answer is, it's just more damage. The only time you want to go solar on pure single target is when you're playing 2 Umbral Intensity. Otherwise, it's more damage to just keep cycling your eclipses as fast as possible by always going lunar. If you were to only press Wrath the whole time, it would still be a damage gain on single target. However, if you have 2 or 3 stacks of our 2-piece bonus, or you have an Umbral Embrace proc, you'll want to press Starfire. This adds up to somewhere around 1600 more DPS than just pressing Wrath. And just pressing Wrath is 500 more DPS than pressing Starfire on single target. The last most frequently asked question is, when do I press Stellar Flare? Short answer is always. Long answer is also kind of always, but it changes with number of targets. If you're playing 2 Umbral Intensities, it's on 7 or less targets. If there are 8 or more, you don't bother and you'll just press Starfire. This is another situation where playing Mushrooms comes in handy, because you'll be able to get Waning Twilight bonus on all those mobs. Again, the only dungeon where you really find yourself playing 2 Umbral Intensities is Alg'ethar Academy, but keep it in mind, if you're not playing 2 Umbral Intensities, so you're playing 0 or 1, the number of mobs that you'll want to Stellar Flare on is 11 or less. Realistically, it can be hard to maintain Stellar Flare on that many mobs, but it is a damage gain if you're able to do it. I would say most of the time, if there's more than 7 mobs, regardless of how many Umbral Intensities I'm playing, I won't keep Stellar Flare on all of them. I'll keep it on a couple priority mobs. Ideally, you want to keep at least 1 on something in the pack for Solstice, but it is not a super big deal. And I think that about covers everything for basics on Minkin in M+. If there's anything I forgot, please let me know in the comments, and I will try to respond to everything I can. If you have questions, I'll leave my Discord in the description. You're more than welcome to come ask in there. I also stream as much as I'm able, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. I'm always happy to answer any questions that people have. And I would encourage, if you feel confused after watching this video, to watch any of the VODs I have uploaded to YouTube. They show me playing low level 20 dungeons from early on in the 10.0 patch. The rotation hasn't changed at all, so the information in there is still good, or stop by my stream. Usually streaming Minkin keys there. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it if you made it this far, or if you watched any portion of the video. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.